Hello and welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. I'm Chris, and tonight we journey back to the very beginnings of Rome, to the quiet hills and flowing Tiber River where destiny stirred. Together, we will follow the story of Romulus and Remus, the legendary twins raised by a she-wolf, guided by fate, and destined to found a city that would change the world. This soothing tale blends Roman mythology, ancient history, and legendary origins in a gentle, sleep-inducing narrative, perfect for dreamlike reflection. Before we begin our journey tonight, let's take time to relax and let go of the stresses of the day. Here and now, there are no obligations, no to-do lists. By simply lying in bed with your eyes closed, you are already giving your body nourishing rest. Imagine yourself settling into a quiet place where the day has softened into evening and the air is calm around you. Take a slow breath in and let it ease out gently, as if the world itself exhales with you. With each breath, imagine the space around you widening, opening, becoming softer and quieter. Let your shoulders release, your mind loosen, and your thoughts drift like leaves carried on a gentle current. Now, picture a landscape far away from the rush of the present time. A land ancient and unhurried. Before you stretch rolling hills, touched by the last gold of sunset. Shadows gather softly at their bases, while the warm light lingers at their peaks. A river winds below, untroubled and steady, whispering to the stones it passes. This is the Tiber, long before cities rose on its banks, long before armies marched, long before the world knew the name Rome. Let the scene unfold slowly. The air smells of earth warming in the dusk, of wild herbs crushed under wandering deer, of water slipping around smooth stones. There is no sound but the river's murmur and the distant call of birds returning to roost. As you breathe, imagine yourself standing at the edge of time, watching the early world rest. You feel the hush of ancient Italy settling around you. A place where stories were born long before they were told. A place where destiny stirred on quiet hills. And in this peaceful stillness, the story of Romulus and Remus begins. Long before marble temples gleamed under Roman sunlight, long before the Senate argued beneath carved colonnades, the land that would one day cradle the greatest ancient city was simple, quiet, and unhurried. It was a landscape shaped not by empire, but by wind, water, and time itself. The first light of morning touched it just as gently as it had for thousands of years, softening the edges of rolling hills and tracing a silver path across the winding Tiber River. The region was later known as Latium, home to the early Latin peoples. But in this moment of distant antiquity, it existed without names or borders, only open skies and earth, slowly waking to the sun. Herds of deer moved cautiously among thickets of oak and fig. Wild birds lifted into the cool air, their wings catching the first pale shimmer of dawn. Across the hills, small communities of early settlers tended simple homes of clay and straw, unaware that they lived upon soil destined for legend. The Tiber River was the silent keeper of this world. It carved through the land with patient constancy, gathering smaller streams into its embrace, unfurling through valleys where reeds whispered and fish darted beneath the surface. On either side of its gentle flow rose a cluster of hills, later 7 in number, quiet guardians of the landscape. The Palatine, the Aventine, the Capitoline. In this early time, they stood nameless, their slopes clothed in wild grasses, their crests crowned with scattered trees. Each hill carried its own personality, one steep, another broad, another curved like a sleeping animal under the sky. Centuries later, Rome would rise here, stone by stone, law by law. But before men built walls or carved roads into the earth. These hills were places of refuge and shelter. They held caves where shepherds rested during storms, and clearings where early villagers lit small fires and shared simple meals. At night, the stars gathered above them like a vast celestial tapestry, bright and undisturbed by city light. The people of early Latium lived quietly among these hills. They tended goats and sheep, cultivated small patches of wheat and barley, and watched the seasons turn in long, patient cycles. Though life was modest, it was also full of meaning. They offered thanks to the forces they believed watched over them. The spirits in the streams, the protectors in the forests, the unseen powers of hearth and sky. Some of these beliefs came from their own traditions, passed down through stories. Others were inherited from neighboring peoples. To the north lived the Etruscans, skilled builders and craftsmen, whose influence brushed the outskirts of Latium like a faint but steady breeze. To the east roamed the Sabines, proud and resilient, their own customs worn into the fabric of the region. These cultures mingled gently, shaping early Italy into a tapestry of shared rituals, languages, and legends. It was in this setting, this land of whispering grasses, ancient hills, and rivers winding through quiet valleys, that the story of Rome's founding took root. Here, myth and history intertwined, not as contradictions, but as threads of the same tapestry. For the early Romans believed that their origins were not merely the result of human endeavor, but of divine guidance and destiny. As the sun climbed higher above the hills, the light revealed pathways carved by countless footsteps, worn smooth by shepherds tending their flocks. It touched the small villages where families prepared for another day of work. It glimmered on the riverbanks where children played and where fishermen cast simple nets into the shallows. Life here moved slowly, rhythmically, guided by the land. Though none of these early inhabitants knew the shape of the future, There was a sense, subtle as the breeze moving through the reeds, that something momentous would one day rise from these hills. The land felt ancient, yet expectant, as though holding its breath in quiet anticipation. For in the generations to come, a line of kings would rule in a distant settlement called Alba Longa. From that royal house would emerge a story that would change these hills forever. A story carried in whispers, nurtured in uncertainty, and shaped by extraordinary destiny. But for now, the land rested. The hills watched silently. The Tiber glided on, patient and untroubled. And the world waited, unaware that in time 2 infants would be born, whose lives would entwine with the fate of these hills, and whose names would echo through history: Romulus and Remus. The tale of the twin founders was still far in the future, yet in this tranquil moment, under open skies and soft, warming light, the quiet world of early Italy held within it all the beginnings of a legend. In the centuries before Rome existed, long before the twins who would shape its destiny were born, another city held the thread of the story. It was the place called Alba Longa, a quiet settlement stretched along the ridge of the Alban Hills, overlooking a tranquil lake that mirrored the sky. Nestled in the soft folds of the landscape, Alba Longa was said to have been founded by Ascanius, the son of Aeneas, the Trojan hero who carried the remnants of his people across the seas after the fall of Troy. Though this tale lived partly in the realm of myth, it was deeply rooted in Roman identity. For the Romans believed that their origins flowed from noble exile, perseverance, and destiny. And so, Alba Longa became the spiritual ancestor of Rome, a city ruled by a long line of kings descended from Ascanius, each passing down traditions, rituals, and the quiet belief that the gods still watched over them. The Alban Hills were peaceful, covered in dense woodlands of beech and oak. Herds grazed on the clearings, and from the heights one could see the shimmering surface of Lake Albano, perfectly round and calm, as if carved by the hands of ancient divinities. Life in Alba Longa moved steadily, guided by seasonal festivals and the rhythm of agriculture. Families tended vineyards, olive groves, and grain fields. The temples dedicated to the old gods stood quietly, their altars warmed by gentle offerings, grain, wine, and prayers whispered at sunrise. Among the kings who ruled Alba Longa was Proca, remembered in the old histories as a just and respected leader. He had 2 sons, Numitor the elder and Amulius the younger. According to custom, the throne should have been passed to Numitor. He was steady-tempered, wise, and beloved by the people. But fate, so often unpredictable, had other plans. Amulius, ambitious and sharp-hearted, feared a life lived in the shadow of his older brother. And so, through quiet maneuvering and decisive action, he seized the throne for himself. The transition was swift, though not without sorrow. Numitor was pushed aside, his rightful inheritance slipping through his fingers like sand. Yet Amulius did more than take the crown. He acted to secure it, for he knew that any children born to Numitor's line may one day challenge his hold on power. To prevent this, he devised a way to break the chain of succession. Numitor had a daughter named Rhea Silvia, a young woman of noble bearing and gentle spirit. Amulius forced her into the service of the goddess Vesta, making her a Vestal virgin, sworn to chastity. A Vestal could not marry or bear children. Her life was dedicated to tending the sacred flame that symbolized the hearth and continuity of the city. By placing her in this role, Amulius believed he had severed any possibility of rivals arising from Numitor's lineage. Rhea Silvia accepted her new life with quiet grace. She lived among the other Vestals in tranquil seclusion, performing rituals, maintaining the eternal flame, and drawing water from sacred springs. Her days were structured and calm, filled with prayer, discipline, and soft footsteps echoing through marble halls. Yet, beneath that serenity lay an unspoken truth. She had been placed there not by divine calling, but by political necessity. Amulius, thinking the matter settled, ruled Alba Longa with increasing confidence. He strengthened the guard around the city, maintained alliances, and ensured that the royal line remained firmly in his grasp. But ancient stories often remind us that destiny is not easily controlled. And so, in the quiet sanctuary where Rhea Silvia lived, events stirred that no king, no matter how powerful, could have foreseen. In the old Roman tales, it is said that Mars, the god of war, visited Rhea Silvia, and that from this union the twins Romulus and Remus would be conceived. Whether understood as divine intervention, symbolic representation, or later interpretation, the story carried great significance. It reflected the Roman view that their founders were shaped by both mortal struggle and divine purpose. But in this moment, before those fateful births, Alba Longa remained still. The hills watched over the ridge. The sacred fire burned softly, and the city stood unaware that the choices of one ambitious king had already set the first stones of Rome's destiny into motion. Soon, the balance would shift again. Soon, a story would turn toward the woman in white robes, the twins she would bear, and the quiet stirring of history beneath the Alban sky. Rhea Silvia's life in the house of the Vestals unfolded in quiet rhythm. The sanctuary stood apart from the noise of Alba Longa, sheltered by groves of laurel and ash. Each morning she rose before sunrise, her steps soft on the polished stone, as she joined the other priestesses in tending the sacred flame. It was believed that as long as the fire of Vesta burned, the city's spirit remained protected. And so, the Vestals moved with calm precision, embodying the peace they wished to preserve. Though Rhea Silvia fulfilled her duties with grace, a quiet question lived within her heart. Was this truly the path meant for her? She had not chosen the life of a Vestal, It had been forced upon her by Romulus, an act of control disguised as piety. Yet, despite this, she found comfort in the rituals. The soft crackle of the eternal fire soothed her. The chants whispered at dawn brought her stillness, and the calm companionship of the other priestesses made her days gentle, if not truly free. But fate, in its patient way, had already begun to move around her. One evening, while gathering water from a sacred spring, Rhea Silvia was said to have been visited by Mars, the god of war. In Roman tradition, this encounter marked the divine conception of her children. Whether viewed as literal truth, symbolic storytelling, or a poetic reflection of destiny, the moment held deep meaning. It suggested that the future founders of Rome carried with them the strength, discipline, and courage associated with the god. In the months that followed, Rhea Silvia's quiet life changed. The signs of her pregnancy soon became impossible to hide. The other priestesses were troubled, fearful of breaking their sacred vows, while Rhea herself was filled with both awe and uncertainty. She knew the punishment for breaking the vows of a Vestal could be severe. Yet, she also felt a strange, calm certainty that the children she carried were meant for something extraordinary. When Romulus heard the news, his fear was immediate. He suspected treachery, or worse, a challenge to his stolen throne. If Rhea Silvia bore sons, they could one day rise to reclaim their grandfather Numitor's rightful rule, and so Romulus acted not out of justice, but out of dread. He ordered Rhea Silvia imprisoned, and when the time came for her to give birth, she was closely watched. The twins entered the world on a quiet night, under a sky brushed by pale stars. They were strong infants, healthy and vibrant. Rhea Silvia held them only briefly, whispering small hopes into their tiny ears. Her heart torn between love and fear. She named them Romulus and Remus, though she knew she might never speak their names again. Romulus, unwilling to spill royal blood, but determined to remove the threat, commanded his servants to take the newborns and abandon them. The Tiber River, swollen with seasonal flooding, had risen beyond its banks, and servants placed the babies in a small wooden trough, hoping the waters would carry them far from Alba Longa. They left the cradle among the reeds, expecting the river to decide the twins' fate. Yet, the Tiber did not claim them. The waters, though high, moved gently, guiding the wooden cradle along its edge rather than sweeping it away. It drifted slowly to the base of a hill, the very hill that would one day become central to Rome's story. There, the cradle settled, caught among the roots of a wild fig tree, known long after as the Ficus ruminalis. Night deepened. The river murmured softly, and the twins slept, unaware of the world shifting around them. Here, on the quiet riverbank, the next chapter of their journey would begin. Not among kings or warriors, but under the watchful eyes of the natural world, where an unexpected guardian waited in the shadows. The wooden cradle floated gently along the Tiber, carried by the river's quiet current. Its small passengers, Romulus and Remus, were unaware of the vast world waiting beyond the reeds and grasses. The river whispered around them, brushing softly against the hull, as though guiding them towards safety rather than harm. The night was calm, the sky clear, and the air filled with the soft scent of earth and water. It was a place where nature itself seemed to pause, holding its breath in gentle anticipation. In the shadows nearby, a figure watched. According to the tales passed down through generations, a she-wolf, a creature both fierce and nurturing, approached the cradle. Her eyes reflected the moonlight as she circled the twins, sniffing the air with careful curiosity. In some versions of the story, she was a literal wolf. In others, she symbolized the lupa, a caretaker or nurse who would protect the children until they were strong enough to face the world. Whatever her form, she became their first guardian, offering warmth, safety, and sustenance. The she-wolf's presence was quiet, steady. She nudged the twins with her nose, her breath warm, her body curled around them like a living blanket. The infants slept soundly, oblivious to the night, comforted by the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. She kept them hidden from the eyes of humans who might do them harm, and from the wild creatures that roamed the riverbanks. In her care, the twins began life surrounded by patience, attentiveness, and the gentle pulse of the natural world. Not far from the riverbank lived Faustulus, a shepherd whose flocks grazed along the hillsides. One evening, as he checked his sheep under the moonlit sky, he noticed a quiet disturbance. A small wooden cradle resting among the roots of a wild fig tree. Inside were two infants, their cries soft and occasional, carried by the wind. Faustulus approached cautiously, but the she-wolf, sensing no threat from him, allowed him near. In awe, he realized that these children were extraordinary in some way, and instinctively he knew he could not leave them alone. Faustulus carried the twins home, where his wife, Acca Laurentia, greeted them with gentle curiosity. Together, they cared for Romulus and Remus as their own, offering food, warmth, and protection. The children grew strong and lively, their spirits shaped by the pastoral world of the shepherds. They ran among the hills, learned to tend the flocks, and explored the forests that surrounded their humble home. They learned courage through play, resilience through gentle lessons, and wisdom through observation of the quiet world around them. Though their royal heritage remained unknown, the twins' upbringing was rich with the teachings of the earth. They observed the changing seasons, listened to the river's flow, and marveled at the creatures of the hills. They learned to be alert, careful, and kind. A connection with the she-wolf, whether literal or symbolic, remained in their hearts, an invisible thread of protection and guidance, reminding them that they were not ordinary and that the world itself watched over them. The river continued to murmur. The hills stood silently, sheltering the shepherd's home. The twins thrived, growing under the tender care of their unexpected guardians. And though no one yet knew their destiny, the foundation of their strength the quiet patience of the natural world, the steadfast love of their caretakers, and the resilience they learned along the riverbank was already being laid. In these early days, the story of Rome began, softly, under the gentle light of the stars. Romulus and Remus grew among the hills, strong and lively, their laughter echoing over the riverbanks and through the pastures. They were more than ordinary children. Their courage and cleverness seemed to outshine the other boys of the countryside. Even in their play, they displayed a quiet authority, guiding younger children, tending the flocks, and helping the shepherds in ways that suggested instinctive leadership. The story of their origins was hidden from them, yet somehow the world seemed to recognize their significance. As they approached adolescence, the twins' strength and boldness could no longer be contained within the gentle bounds of the hills. They ventured farther, meeting other shepherds and villagers. Their bravery drew attention, and they occasionally clashed with rivals, always emerging with a confidence that suggested they were destined for more than ordinary lives. It was in these moments that subtle whispers of their identity began to emerge. Stories of an unknown lineage, of noble blood hidden beneath the guise of simplicity. One day, their actions brought them into direct conflict with men who had been loyal to the deposed King Romulus. In a skirmish meant to test their courage, they were captured. The young men who held them recognized something unusual in the twins. The same spark that would one day define leaders. They decided to bring them before Numitor, the rightful king of Alba Longa. Still exiled, but living quietly among supporters. The moment the twins entered Numitor's presence, the connection was undeniable. He saw in them the same features, the same determination, the same quiet authority that had once marked his own family. Numitor realized that these were his grandsons, the children of Rhea Silvia, the rightful heirs to his throne. The revelation unfolded gently, almost as if the hills and the river themselves had guided the reunion. Numitor welcomed Romulus and Remus into his home, recounting their lineage with patience and care. He spoke of Alba Longa, of the kings who had come before, and of the injustice that had forced them into exile. The twins listened, absorbing the stories with a quiet intensity, understanding not only their heritage, but also the responsibility that came with it. They were no longer simply shepherd boys. They were heirs, with a connection to the past and a destiny that stretched far into the future. With Numitor's guidance, Romulus and Remus began to act with purpose. They organized allies loyal to the rightful king, reclaiming Alba Longa, not with needless cruelty, but with careful planning and courage. Amulius, who had acted from fear, was removed from power, and Numitor was restored. Justice returned to the city, not in the form of vengeance, but in the quiet fulfillment of destiny. In these moments, the twins began to understand the balance between strength and compassion, courage and patience. The world had shaped them gently but firmly, and now they were ready for the next chapter of their story. The hills, the river, and the she-wolf's memory remained with them. Subtle reminders that destiny often begins quietly, nurtured in hidden places before it rises to claim its form. Romulus and Remus had grown into young men, strong, clever, and guided by a quiet wisdom. Though they had restored their grandfather Numitor to his throne, their hearts were drawn elsewhere. The hills and river that had cradled their infancy called to them still, whispering of a future yet to be shaped. It was here, where the she-wolf had watched over them, and the Tiber flowed gently, that they began to dream of a city of their own, a place where the values they had learned could take root and grow. The twins spoke often of the land where they had first slept in the cradle. Romulus imagined walls of strength rising atop the Palatine Hill, houses clustered together in harmony, streets guiding travelers toward the river. Remus favored the Aventine Hill, with its gentle slopes and open spaces, envisioning a city where the people could move freely, unconfined by rigid boundaries. Their visions differed, yet neither was wrong. Both were filled with hope, promise, and a shared desire to build a home worthy of their heritage. To choose the site, they turned to the ancient custom of augury, interpreting the flight of birds as messages from the gods. Romulus waited upon the Palatine, counting the birds that appeared in the sky. while Remus watched from the Aventine, measuring his own signs. The heavens seemed patient, the birds moving gracefully, as if aware that two hearts were weighing the future of a people yet to come. Days passed in this quiet observation, each twin meditating upon the land and the life it could support. As they contemplated the city's founding, the twins welcomed settlers to join them, men and women from nearby villages, travellers without homes, and even those once cast aside by society. Each person brought skills, stories, and hopes that enriched the vision of the city. Together, they began to mark boundaries, clear small spaces, and imagine the rhythm of streets and plazas. The air was filled with anticipation, soft conversation, and the distant murmur of the Tiber threading through the hills. Yet, even in this calm and collaborative effort, a subtle tension lingered between the brothers. Both were eager to honour their past while shaping the future, and neither wished to yield entirely. Their debate, though gentle, carried the weight of destiny. The silent understanding that the choice of the city's location would define generations to come. And so, beneath the golden light of dawn and the watchful presence of the hills, Romulus and Remus prepared to take the final steps toward establishing the city that would one day become Rome. Their dreams were rooted in courage, guided by the lessons of the river, and nurtured by the quiet strength that had carried them from the cradle to the hills. A legacy of survival, guardianship, and hope for all who would call this place home. Romulus and Remus had chosen the site for their new city. Yet, the gentle debate over the hills had not fully resolved. Romulus favoured the Palatine, steep and commanding, envisioning a place of protection and strength. Remus preferred the Aventine, open and expansive, imagining a city where freedom and harmony could flourish. The twins, though bound by love and shared destiny, now faced a quiet tension that reflected the weight of their responsibility. To decide, they turned once more to the practice of augury. They observed the birds, the flight patterns, and the signs of the heavens. Each brother read the sky differently, interpreting messages that seemed to favour his own vision. The air above the hills was calm, yet charged with anticipation, as if nature itself held its breath. Days passed with soft discussions, silent walks across the hills, and thoughtful reflection on the future they hoped to build. Then came the moment of the leap. In a gesture meant to test the walls Romulus had begun to build atop the Palatine, Remus stepped lightly over the growing boundary. His movement a mixture of jest and challenge. In that instant, Romulus saw the act not as playful, but as symbolic, a breach of the city's security, a warning of what might come from disregard. The brothers' disagreement, once quiet, now surged with the intensity of their shared vision. Remus fell, struck down not with malice, but with the tragic weight of destiny. The young twin's life ended in that gentle, fateful moment, leaving Romulus with sorrow heavier than any he had known. Yet, within the grief came understanding. The city could not be divided, and its strength required focus, resolve, and unwavering commitment. Alone, Romulus stood upon the Palatine Hill, gazing across the river and the hills that had witnessed his birth, his childhood, and now the solemn beginning of his leadership. He named the city Rome, honouring the legacy that had carried him from the riverbank to this place of responsibility. The first foundations were laid with care and intention, a quiet ceremony observed by those who had followed the twins, marking the birth of a city that would endure for generations. Though Remus was gone, his memory lingered in the soft rustle of leaves, in the river's gentle flow, and in the strength that Romulus drew from the lessons of his brother. The city rose not from triumph alone, but from the balance of courage, grief, and hope, a place destined to become a home for all who sought shelter, protection, and the quiet promise of a future shaped by vision and resilience. Romulus stood alone atop the Palatine Hill, the early foundations of Rome stretching before him, soft earth warmed by the sun. Though the city was still small, it carried the weight of destiny, the promise of something greater. In the quiet of the hills, he remembered the river that had carried him and Remus as infants, the she-wolf that had watched over them, and the shepherds who had nurtured them. Every step of their journey had been guided by patience, courage, and unseen hands that shaped their path. Romulus became the first king of Rome, not through mere strength, but through careful planning and compassion. He established the Senate, bringing together elders and leaders to advise and guide the city. He organized a small army, not for conquest, but for protection, ensuring that Rome could grow safely. And he opened the city to outsiders, welcoming those without homes or kin, creating a community built on inclusion and shared purpose. The early Romans were inspired not only by his leadership, but by the enduring story of the twins who had survived against all odds. Even as Rome expanded, the memory of Remus remained. His leap over the wall, a symbol of challenge and spirit, was honored in quiet reflection. The story of the brothers, of survival, courage, and destiny, was told gently among the people, reminding them that the city's strength lay not in walls or armies alone, but in the values it held and the care it offered to those who called it home. Romulus's reign, though marked by human sorrow and triumph, set the pattern for centuries to come. The hills, the river, and the echoes of the she-wolf's presence remained as enduring witnesses to the city's beginnings. Rome was born from patience, resilience, and hope, shaped by the quiet lessons of the past and the vision of a boy who had once slept in a cradle upon the riverbank. And so, under the gentle sky of Latium, the story of Romulus and Remus ended not in sorrow alone, but in the serene birth of a city destined to carry their legacy through time. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story, and that it has brought you a night of peaceful, restful sleep. Please join me again tomorrow night for another sleep story. Until then, sweet dreams.